My name is James Churchill, and I'm here to talk to you today about reactive programming with RxJS. So thanks for being here. You guys having a good time today so far? Woo! All right. Wow, it's packed in here. So it's great seeing all your smiling faces. Appreciate it. So I'm going to start off right away by asking the question, what is reactive programming? You know, there are a lot of different ways to define reactive programming. Some of those definitions are helpful, and sometimes they're maybe a little confusing. I personally like how Andre Staltz defines reactive programming. And he says that reactive programming is programming with asynchronous data streams. And that's from his introduction to reactive programming that you've been missing. It's a free resource he has online. Really great introduction, by the way. He's the man, so to speak. So he goes on to say in that introduction that this really isn't a new idea, and he's right, of course. You know, mouse and keyboard events, for instance, are really just asynchronous event streams. And you can observe those, and you can have handlers that are going to perform side effects when you receive those events. So reactive programming takes this idea of an asynchronous event stream or data stream to a new level. And it applies it to many different aspects of your application, including UI events, data flows, and other asynchronous operations, you know, things like HTTP requests. Who recognizes this? Anyone in the room? Shout it out if you know what this is. So this is VisiCalc, which was released, I had to look it up so I couldn't remember, but like mid-1979 for the Apple II computer. This is one of the earliest, I don't know if it's the earliest, but it's certainly an early example of what we would think of like how an app that's written in a reactive way behaves. So one of the things that made this groundbreaking was that you could have a value, and when you updated that value, it flowed through anything that referenced that value. And that was a completely new idea, and it really, like, you know, took the world by storm, quite literally. So we're going to, from there, we're just going to go ahead and jump into a quick demo just to kind of emphasize that point as to what happens, and that is, like, massively huge. So let's take it down a notch. You know, a little too much there. All right. So again, for those who haven't used a spreadsheet in here, I know there's a few of you in here who haven't done that. Let's cover what this does. So column A has a value 2, column B has a value 3, and column C ends up being an expression. We're declaring our intentions here. We're saying we want to take the sum of A and B and display the value in C. All that's good and great. And the key thing here is that when we update a value, of course, you get the expected behavior, that value just flows in through C, and we see the results of that. So in RxJS terms, we can say that A and B are observables, and C is an observer or a subscriber. It's listening to those events or those data changes that are flowing from A and B, and then reacting to that and re-rendering its contents. Okay? So with that in mind, let's go ahead and look at some simple examples of how we can use RxJS to create observables. Just out of curiosity, is anyone here already using RxJS like on a regular basis? All right, so wouldn't you mind, can you walk up here and kind of back? No. Okay. Well, catch me if I do something wrong, all right? Yeah, okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use the Rx library to create an observable. So we can say const, and I'm just going to, because I'm lazy and pressed for time right now, because we have a short time, I'm going to do a lot of abbreviation here of my variables. So I apologize about that in advance. But then we're going to say rx.observable, and then we're going to use a function called interval. And notice that I'm not using new here. This is a static that's defined on the observable object, and then we can pass in a number. And I'll just pass in 1,000. So what interval is going to do is create an observable that's going to emit a stream of values over time, and those values are going to be spaced apart or arrive every 1 second. So that 1,000 stands for 1,000 milliseconds. So we now have our observable, but nothing's going to happen until we do what? Subscribe to it, right? So we say subscribe, and then we need to pass in a function to handle the values that are coming out of that. So we say console log v, and then if we go over to the browser and reload the page, and we start to see values. It's magic, right? Yeah, first demo, hey, it worked. The rest of it is demos from here on out, so there's plenty of opportunity for me to do something wrong. So let's make that a little smaller. So if you haven't seen an interval-based observable before, this is just going to do what? It's just going to keep going on and on and on. In fact, if you don't trust me on that, we could just sit here the rest of the presentation and watch it to see if it ever ends. All right, okay, you guys are going to trust me on that? All right, good, thank you. Another key thing about observables is that you can have more than one subscriber. So we can subscribe more than once, and of course, if we come out here and reload the browser, now we can see that there's 3 sets of each value being written to the log because we have 3 listeners, 3 subscribers to that observable, okay? What else can we do? We talked about multiple subscribers. Well, so that stream of values is never ending. At some point on our side of that relationship, we may get bored of that. We may get tired and say, we don't want to listen to or receive your values anymore. Well, there's an easy way to do that as long as we don't ignore the return value that's coming out of the subscribe method. So we can say const, and I'm just going to call this, well, it's a subscription. So I'll say sub. That's not a confusing variable name at all, right? And then I'll say sub, unsubscribe, unsubscribe, like that. So who knows what's going to happen when this runs? Nothing, right? Well, that's expected, of course, because we subscribed, but then we were immediately unsubscribing, which doesn't really make any sense. So to make this an interesting demo, we're going to call set timeout, and we'll put that inside of there. And let's say, because again, we're short on time, we're going to only wait 5 seconds for that to unsubscribe. And then if we reload this, we should see a total of 5 values emitted, and then it should stop. So it worked. Imagine that. So the last thing that I want to show you here is that an observable in and of itself on its own is not really that interesting. Where RxJS starts to really get to be beneficial is that there's a whole collection of operators that we can take advantage of on this observable object. So for instance, map is a very common higher order function that you're probably all familiar with. And of course, we have a map function available to us. So we can take each value and we can multiply it, say, by 2. And then if we reload that, then we'll see our values transformed into multiples of 2, of course. And then we could go a step further and say, well, of those multiples of 2, we only want the ones, so we'll do a filter, that are divisible by 7. And that's going to be a little slower, so let's speed this up a little bit so we can see the results of, oh man, that's a little too fast. And now we can see that it's not multiples of 7, right? Because we're doing that map, that multiplication into doubling it. So we're going to see these are all the even numbers that are divisible by 7, okay? So congratulations. You have now completed the first 10 minutes of 101 RxJS. That's all you need to know, right? What else could you possibly need to know to be productive using RxJS? Well, maybe a few things. So let's do this. Let's take another simple example and try to do something productive with just what we know so far. So what we're going to do is we're going to build our own spreadsheet. Imagine that. So we have a very simple HTML page, and it has a table. And in this table are 3 input elements, cleverly named A, B, and C. It took me a while to come up with that. You need to appreciate that, guys. Okay, so I've given us a bit of a jump start here by using document query selector to get a reference, to get a handle to those input elements. So remember the behavior in the spreadsheet was that when we were in a cell and we tabbed off of it, then something happened, right? So what event would I be interested in using? Blur, right? So let's create our first observable. So we'll say const, and I'm going to call this a values, and then we're going to use rx.observable and from event. And we can pass in an object that we want to subscribe an event on. So we're going to take the A input element, and then we're going to use, or say that we want blur, not blue, blur. Okay. Now, again, nothing's going to happen because we haven't done what? Subscribe. Yep. So we're going to subscribe, and we're going to say console log v. And then we're just going to go check this out and see what is happening here. Open up the console, and I'll tab off, and we get a focus event. So we're making progress. So let's take a look at what's in here. Does anyone know a property that's going to be interesting for us? Here we go, source element, right? And then on source element, that's the input element itself. If we scroll and scroll and scroll, does anyone know the property we're looking for? Value, thank you. I won't waste your time anymore with that. So we need to take this focus event and we need to turn it into something else. So what operator would we use? Map. Excellent. See? You are catching on. You're ready to go. We can just stop now. Everyone can go get a snack or something to eat. We're good to go. Okay, so we want to take the value, which is the focus event, and that was source element, right? And then we're going to say value here. And let's make sure that I did that correctly. So if we put in there, now we're getting a 2. Okay, so we're making progress. But there's probably something else that we need to do this before we can sum those values. So let's do this. Let's do a do, which really is a no-op operator. It just is a way for us to inject another operator into our pipeline of operators, if you will, and we can test some assumptions. So we get the value, and then I can say console log, if I could type of v. And we'll just see what that is. Reload to, okay, so it's a string. So we don't want strings, because if we sum strings, we're not going to get what we're looking for, right? So we need to do another map. So now we can say map v, and then what would we use to turn it into a number? Yeah, so parse. And I'm going to go ahead and assume that we have sophisticated users, and they're not going to just give us integers. So we're going to say parse float, and we'll do that. And then, again, we'll just check our assumptions here. So if we do 2, now we're getting a number. Hey, we're making progress. So let's get rid of that. I think we're done with that. Let's get rid of our subscribe. And now we have our first observable, right? So we have 2 maps to get the numbers out of that. And we need to repeat this, of course. So I'm going to do the professional senior developer thing and copy and paste what was there before. And hopefully no one has any problems with that. But clearly there would be, if you look at these 2 sets of lines, there's lots of opportunity to make this better. I'll let you do that as an exercise later. So now we have A values and B values, streams of values, streams of numbers, in this case, being emitted. So now we need to combine these. And luckily there are operators that allow you to combine multiple streams. So now we can say const C values, and we'll say Rx observable. And then we'll use what? Anyone have an idea what to use here? Combine latest. Awesome. Thank you. So if you didn't know, just for those else's edification here, if we went here and then, oh wow, boy, there, this website. So this is a website that is put out by someone in the community, and it's just a really great resource. It's not official documentation, but I find it to be pretty helpful, and they give you lots of examples. So you can explore the operators and see what they do. He even goes through, check this out, and he stars the ones that you would care about initially, because there's a lot of noise here, right? So really good resource, so keep that in mind as you're learning. So combine latest, and then we're going to pass in A values, B values, and then we have the opportunity to supply like a projection method here, similar to map. We can do something with those 2 values. So we can say A comma B, and I'll do another arrow function, and I'm just going to say A plus B, like that. And then down here, we'll subscribe to this. So we'll say C values, because again, it's an observable. So we'll say this, and we'll console log that again. Okay. And we'll come back over here, and we'll see if this is still working for me. Hey, look at that. So now we're getting, I have to supply both values. Supplying one wasn't good enough, but now we're starting to see some results. So we need to close the loop, and that actually is pretty easy to do, because we can go here and just say that v dot value equals v. Let that refresh. And now we can, oh, thank you. So v dot value, what am I doing wrong here? C dot value. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that code review, man. That's awesome. Okay. And there it is. Okay, so time check. We have 15 minutes, right, passed, and we're going to about another 10 minutes. Is that right? Okay. So let's go ahead. I'm doing okay on time. I haven't been talking too fast, have I? No? Okay. So let's clean this up, because I'm kind of embarrassed by this. So let's do a const, and then I'll say that's ops. And then ops is going to take an observable, and then it's going to do, well, I won't do that there, but now I'm going to cut that and put that up there. So now what we have is we have a function that we've declared is going to take an observable, and it's going to tack on these, it's going to add on these two operators, right? And check this out. Now we can say let, and we can pass in that ops function, okay? So what let does as an operator is it allows us to get a handle on the observable that we're applying the operator to. So we can pass that up to this little helper function and add on our operators. So that's really convenient, because now we can simply add this down here. And we've eliminated our duplicated code, which now I feel, as a person and a developer, much better. I'm going to be able to sleep tonight, I think. So let's make sure that I didn't break the app and everything is still working. Okay? So you're now 15, 20 minutes into day one of 101 RxJS. Are you feeling pretty good about this so far? Okay, excellent. So hopefully this gives you, I mean, this is a simplistic example, but it does give you, I think, a relatively decent job, I think, of the flavor of how this feels, right? There's a fair amount of composition going on here. We're expressing our intent and just kind of letting the events and data flow through. We do have side effects, of course. That's sort of inevitable in an app if you want to be able to display data back to the user. But this is very low tech. Now, how about Angular 2? Is anyone here interested in seeing an Angular 2 demo? Yeah? Okay. So one of the cool things about Angular 2 and RxJS, and in fact, this is the reason why I even bothered to learn RxJS in the first place, is that it's used throughout Angular 2. Okay? So it's kind of interesting, because when you're first learning Angular 2 and you're learning components and services and DI and it's everything else that they have in there, you may not recognize the RxJS initially, okay? But it shows up in a lot of places. So we're going to look at an Angular 2 app. You can see that Angular 2 apps have a stunning visual design. You get that by default. I didn't have to do anything. That's what that 2 megabyte bundle that you end up with at the end. Half of that is CSS, and it's this CSS, and it looks amazing, doesn't it? Okay, so the team that's been working on this, they sent this code to me and said, it works, but we're seeing some interesting things. So the idea behind this website, which is using ASP.NET Core for the back end, so I'm running this on a Mac. Is that cool? Anyone like that? As an ASP.NET developer, I'm totally psyched that I can do that now and not be in a VM, right? About time. So where was I at? I totally lost my train of thought. Okay, so what the error is, so this is a collection of ASP.NET Core resources. And there's, here's some blog post from a guy named Scott Hanselman. I don't know what that's about. It has a score of 3, so 3 people thought it was interesting. Oh, there's me. Imagine that. And I wrote another blog post. Yeah, it's not true. I don't blog that often. So the idea is it's a list of resources. And if we search, we can look up things. So if I type COOL, the list just interactively gets filtered down to whatever my criteria is. But this is a little concerning. Why were 4 calls to get resources search made? Well, let's test this out. Holy smokes. So I just typed a bunch of characters, random, and we hit our API 21 times. Does anyone think that's a good idea? No, right? That's a horrible idea. So let's take a look at why that's happening. If we come over to all right, everyone can see that. It's not getting chopped off. If we come over to and we're not going to have nearly the time to discuss like everything that's going on here in this app. We're going to look at the component, right? So this is the template for the component, and this is what is rendering out our list. And at the top of this, we have an input element. And right away, hopefully you can see what the issue is here. We have an event binding. Yes, it's in round curly braces, right, as they call them. That's the syntax for binding to events. You get used to it. It's really not that bad. And then that's binding to a search method on our component. Well, if we go take a look at that, we can see inside of here, and you'll just have to trust me on this, that it's calling see, every time a term comes through, it's calling resource service get resources search, right? So every key up, it's doing that. We don't want to do that. We can do better. So first of all, I'm going to do something, and again, because we don't have time, you're just going to have to take my word that this is what we want to do. We're going to do a property binding on something called form control. And then I'm going to set that value from a property that doesn't exist yet called term. Then we're going to come over to our component. There'll be a test on this later, so remember all this. There's going to be a property here called term, and it's going to be new form control. Okay? That allows us to supply the form control that was implicitly there anyway, but now we're given it an instance of so that we can interact with it. Inside of ng on init, which is a handler that we can provide that will be called on initialization of this component, we can do this. We can see this.term value changes. And if we look at value changes, take a look at that. It's of type observable, which means that we can do something with that. So we can say dot value changes. And isn't the IntelliSense, I'm in Visual Studio Code, right? Not a full-blown IDE, and I'm getting statement completion and all that. I love it. So value changes dot subscribe, and then we'll just log this to the console just to make sure that we have it working correctly. So I'll say console log v. I'm getting statement completion, and I'm still managing fat finger keys and make it break. So we'll reload this. And now, with any luck, there we go. So we still have the same problem that we did before, but now we're not using a key up binding to get those values. We're subscribing to the observable to get the stream of data that's coming out of that. Well, now that we have an observable, we have there's a whole library of operators that we can use, including debounce time. And debounce time, really it's like a gatekeeper, right? It's going to prevent any values from coming through until there's a certain amount of idleness that happens, and that idleness is the 400 milliseconds. So if we come over here, what you're not seeing is that Webpack is busily recompiling my app in the background. It's done, and then we reload this page, and now if I type like crazy, then we get the API call, right? So because we're dealing with the observable now instead of the event, one operator, and we've fixed our problem. But there's one more bug here, or one more improvement we can make. Let's say I type post, and there's our post query. And let's say I backspace the T and add the T back. Oh, and we got a second request, even though it was the same value. So let's take another 15 minutes and fix that problem. All right, it's not 15 minutes. We just add the distinct until changed operator, and that's another gatekeeper, right? It's the filter operator that is going to watch the stream of values. And if the value hasn't changed from the one that was the one preceding it or the current value, it doesn't let it through. So save. Isn't it a nice day outside? It's beautiful, isn't it? Nothing going on there, hand waving. And so now if I type post, we see that. But if I backspace the T and type again, nothing. Crickets, right? OK, and so the last thing we need to do is we subscribed, but we're just console logging. So we can take the term. We'll wipe this out and replace that with a set of curly braces. And then we'll grab the guts of this. And we can kill search. We're not calling that anymore. And I'll fix my indentation because this is how I roll. And now we have our finished version. Oh, OK, sorry. And let's try this out. So cool. And there we go. It filtered down to the one post, one API call, right? And if I just slam this thing, there we go, second API call. So that's an improvement, right? So It's not everything you need to know about RxJS. It can be an intimidating beginning process because it's a large library. But there are a lot of places you can go to get help, including the ReactiveX website has a lot of great content. This is the top-level official organization that takes care of RxJS 5, and it has implementations for .NET, Java, I mean, really, Scala, like any language, you can go find information about it there. We didn't use marble diagrams at all today, but a common way to visualize how operators are affecting stream of values is to use these marble diagrams. This is an excellent website, RxMarbles, where you can click on an operator, see the visual representation of that, and interact with it. If you'd like to read a book, I didn't show you the width of this. It's a small book. It's a relatively easy read. It's written against RxJS 4, but a lot of the higher level concepts and the information is the same for RxJS 5, which is what's used inside of Angular 2. Really excellent book. Can recommend it more. This is Andre Staltz's Introduction to Reactive Programming You've Been Missing. Awesome, awesome place to start. If you like to watch videos, Egghead has free videos from Andre Staltz and also Ben Lesh, who leads the core team on the RxJS 5 development effort. And UtahJS also has your back as well, because Jeremy Lund is going to be speaking in this room next about reactive programming using observables. So you get not one, but 2 doses of Rx, or maybe he's not using RxJS, maybe he's using something else, but he's going to be talking about observables. Woohoo! Oh, sorry. So that's all I've got for you. Thanks. I'm on Twitter at SmashDev and SmashDevCode for GitHub.